Well, welcome everybody. Today I've got Hersel Cremeans and Paul Gulsvig here. They're two of the most traveled people in show choir land. They are both former directors, arrangers, clinicians, musical geniuses, and we're going to talk about working with clinicians and bringing in a fresh set of eyes to take a look at your show and get some feedback to your kids, get them get used to working with other people and kind of how that all works. So I guess let's start off with just kind of giving people a basic overview. So let's assume, Paul, let's start with you, and let's assume that, if you're a new director and you have no idea how this all works. I mean, what's kind of the norm? I mean, how many groups are doing this? What is it normally like? Just bringing in outside people to work with your choir.
Well, I don't really have a good feel for that. I'm doing probably 16 groups every year, going in and working with them. But I really don't know how many groups are bringing in clinicians. I think that everybody has their strength. So if it's someone that's strong in vocals, they're going to want to bring in somebody besides their choreographer that will come in and clean. And then same thing, if they are looking for feedback with a combo, they're going to call GARRETT'S and make sure that he gets in there and puts things in the right place. I don't know that I answered that question.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is, like, when I was in show choir as a student, we really didn't have a ton of guest people coming in because we always started our show real late, and so we were still learning choreography, in January, February, but I know in other places it's part of the regular pattern that they bring 3-4 people in every year. What's your experience been like, Herschel?
I think it really depends on the program. I think Paul is correct on that. And pre-COVID, I was doing 4 to 5 clinics a week. So some of that was here in town, and I live in Indianapolis, so there's tons of show choir, and there's a wide variety of skill levels. And so a lot of times, most of the time when I go in, it's vocal stuff. They want help with their vocals. That's especially this time of year, early, that they want help with their vocals, things like that, or big picture ideas. So that's something that I get a lot of. So I would say, and some of it's a repeat. Like I'm going to work with one. Like I just went and worked with the school last night, and I'm going to see that same school, 2 choirs from the same school in 2 weeks. Right. So even though I said, 4 to 5 clinics a week, some of those are the school that I was already with, and then I would see, 2 groups at that school or something like that. Yeah. I think I would say fairly confidently that most of the top organizations bring in outside clinicians to work with their choirs, because I think, and we did a webinar last year about this, about collaborating and using, working as a team and working with your arranger and your choreographer, and the power of that collaboration, almost like a superhero, like a collaboration man or something like that. And so when you do that, it allows you to have, like you said, more eyes and more ears on what you're doing. And that's only going to help you, because in a very short time, you're going to take whatever you're doing on the road, and you're going to have 4 or 5 people look at it from a completely different perspective. And then that is how you determine your success of the year, is based on what those 4 or 5 people say. So in my opinion, the more people that you can bring in to look at it and see what's going on, the better you're going to fare in the long run. And it's going to give your kids a chance to learn from different people. And there's so many great people out doing this that, I mean, you can put just amazing people in front of your kids, and I think it's well worth it. I really do. I did it all the time.
Well, I mean, there's like you said, Paul, there's bringing in people who have experience you don't, right? Like if you're not a dance person, bringing in visual clinicians who can help clean stuff, or just getting a fresh set of eyes just because you're so close to it. But I also think too, sometimes we just rehearse so much. It's good for students to just have new people. Like I can't tell you how many times, nearly every time I work with a group, the director's always like, I've been telling them that all year, but because you're not me, they started doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think, and some of that's probably because a lot of the times I'm working with groups that I wrote the arrangements. And so they see my name on the piece of paper and they go, oh, well, he must know what he's talking about because he wrote it, you know? But I think it's a good way to sort of reinforce the teaching that you're doing in the classroom, to have other people come in. I mean, it validates you, right? I think some people can get defensive, like, oh, I'm a vocal person, why would I bring in another vocal person? But when that vocal person comes in and says all the same things that you've been telling them all year, that's validating to your students, because they see that other people are coming in and doing the same stuff. And for some people that can kind of turn on a light bulb, I think.
I think the comment that I get most often, based on what you just said, is that, you know, I've been saying 80% of the same things that you've been saying all year long. But you said it in a different way that resonated with more kids. And so now they're really understanding what it was. And then maybe it's 80% reinforcement and 20% new ideas. And like you said, that often will just be like a charge, like a jump start for the groups to like get re-excited about what's going on. Paul, don't you have a story about when you were a kid and your choir director brought in the mechanic or something?
Oh, that was Joyce Eilers. Joyce Eilers, who wrote for a lot of middle schools, and wrote was the big seller for Hal Leonard for many, many years. She had her own middle school program, and the week before a large group contest, she would hire her gasoline mechanic, her car mechanic, and he'd put on a suit, and then she would write out the script of everything that she wanted him to say. So, and he couldn't read music, so he'd just sit and turn pages as they were going, and then he'd get up and all of the kids would go, oh, yeah. Now I see that, sure. So you know, I used to be that director that when I would bring in Dr. Mountford or John Jacobson and they would say something that I had said 100 times, and all of a sudden the kids would go, wow, that's really smart. I used to get so mad. Now I'm that person, you know. The other thing is that so often the directors are so close to the trees, they can't see the forest. You know, I step in and go, you really want to get rid of that? And they go, oh, you're right. Why didn't I see that? Well, it's because their level of IQ is so high. You know, they want to do their best for their kids. So they almost get too close to them.
Do you think there's a difference between how, like, we're sort of talking about clinicians coming in with show choir? Do you see a big difference between that and just choral music in general, like concert choirs and a cappella choirs and that sort of thing? I mean, because they're also bringing in, guest conductors and that sort of thing. Is it a similar sort of process, or is there something different about show choir that makes it more, I don't know, more useful or more important?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that that there's more of an isolation vocally, that you don't have as many elements, the choreography, the costumes, all of those things, and so the vocal technicians can come in and they're working on tone quality or openness or getting the right style. I don't know that that there's that many similarities between the two, simply because it's more specific.
Yeah, when I do like concert choir clinics, I approach it completely different than I do a show choir clinic. And not only just because you're producing a completely different sound and things like that, but we're so much in the music, and we're talking about, at measure 5 you're doing this, at measure, things like that, as opposed to show choir, and it's like, okay, on beat 6 we want you to do this or whatever it is. And so to me it's different because of that, because of the technical aspect of what it is. Not that we don't get very technical with our choirs, but it's often, how does the choreography affect what they're singing? And often what I do is sometimes I manipulate what their choreography is so it doesn't impede their singing. Whereas with a concert choir, I don't have to worry about that, right? And I can, sometimes it's like I might move a couple kids from where they're standing, but for the most part, it's just, what can we do to make them sound better? And I learned, to be perfectly honest, I learned a lot of my tricks from Paul. I would bring Paul in every year. And I think part of what I think we need to discuss and is important, and especially this time of year, is bringing someone in that can doctor your show up and make sure that you're not missing, like, why is that kid walking all the way across the stage to pick up a microphone, where if he just entered from the other side, he wouldn't interrupt everything else that's going on, that, like Paul said, they just don't see it, because they're so invested in whatever's important to them. Whatever they focus on, then they lose sight of everything else. And so, but I think especially this time of year, what a lot of these kids really need is a sense of community, to know that they are important, no matter what their role is in the show. They're important, and to find ways to facilitate and build a better community. I didn't learn that until, I don't know, maybe I was 6 or 7 years from stepping away from that's a little late in the game, to have been teaching for 10 years and then finally figure that I need to focus just as much on making sure I have a good community here along the way. And I learned most of that from Paul. Thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
So I'd like to hear more about these retreats that you guys do, because, I guess, how is that different than just showing up for a rehearsal, or even an all-day rehearsal? Like, how is a retreat different, or is it just a different name for a big long rehearsal?
There are a lot of different philosophies with retreats, and many people use activities just for activity's sake, and let's have bonding experiences where we just get along, and so when I do a retreat, it's all activities that teach, so that by doing the activity, then they process it and realize that they just learned something that they never knew about this student, and as soon as you learn something about someone else, you learn something about yourself. And the cohesiveness of a group, well, anytime you compare yourself to someone on the stage, you sacrifice your ability to grow. So if you're in the second row, and you see someone dancing in the first row and you go, why is she in the first row? I'm a better performer than she. As soon as you compare yourself to that child in front of you, you sacrifice your ability to grow. And even if you say, I'll never be as good as that, you sacrifice your ability to grow. So my retreats came out of a tragic death in our choral program, and I realized the night that we all came together to mourn her loss, I learned things about those kids I never knew before. And so I was one of those activities for activity's sake people when I first started out, but then I began to have activities that teach inclusiveness. There are a lot of different,
Right.
Going back to the vocal aspect as opposed to the show choir. and I realize this is a gross overstatement, but Iowa and for the most part Nebraska, almost all of those kids are involved in a concert choir as their show choir. And in Illinois, I would say to a certain amount of Indianapolis or Indiana, they're just in show choir, and then they have a separate concert choir. And there's not a lot of crossover. Realize that's a gross overstatement. So you're calling in a vocal person in Nebraska and Iowa, you're going to get somebody with a good vocal background because they can reach all of those kids. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Anything to add on the retreat thing, Herschel?
Yeah, so I think that often when I get asked to do like you said, they call it a retreat, but usually it's like a 8-hour rehearsal, right? And so they want to call it a retreat, so it's not that. It's not typically a 3-day.
It's not like an overnight, or is it?
Right. Yeah. Well, sometimes it is, but I've been doing this now. I left teaching in 2016, so in 5 years, I guess. In 5 years, I've only done one of those, but I've done lots of an all-day rehearsal and things. And so when I was teaching and when I was doing it prior to using Paul and learning more about what he just described, which I now think I do a good job at, I did the activities to break up the monotony of rehearsal. I'm a bit of a tyrant and I'm a bit of a spaz. And so
what?
Kids, I know, right? So kids can only take so much of that intensity, at a time, in, small doses, if you will. So I don't really have an off switch. So I would just go and not understand why they were exhausted, or like it just didn't make sense to me. So I was using the activities to break up that, to give them something to laugh about, to give them something to, again, just a break from that, rather than just get a drink break. Let's take 15 minutes and let's do something to change their thought process and then refocus them because they were exhausted. But then when I started doing it, the different approach, much like Paul did, and admittedly, I don't do it as well as Paul does. I love when the kids, I don't do such a good job of prompting them to have those really intimate thoughts and sharing those really things. I'm better at it than I used to be. And it does happen organically a lot though, with the activities that you do. And it is shocking at some of the things that kids will reveal in front of a large group of kids that they don't know, and how, I'll talk about what I said earlier before we started recording about how to connect with someone right away. It's amazing how quickly they then connect with someone else in the group. And often for show choirs, this is what happens in January. So they've already been in school for half the year together, but just now they're starting to really make those close connections, which I think is perfect because now this is when they're spending, so many extra hours a week together because they're traveling together and all that stuff. So what I like to do with the retreat is make sure the director understands that having a minute-by-minute schedule, there's a lot of directors that want to have, we're going to work on this song for these 52 minutes, and then we're going to have a 4-minute break, and then we're going to do, that's not reality. You can't do that because you have to allow, if you're going to do activities meant to strengthen the group and to do those things, sometimes you have to allow that to happen, which means that something else has to be kind of, because you're not going to keep the kids for 2 extra hours. You still have to honor that. So, and to be perfectly honest, when I first started doing the longer retreats, and that was really hard for me because I specifically wanted the musicality to be addressed, or the movement, or whatever it was. I wanted that to be addressed, but then I found out that this other component was just as important. And when that happened, my groups got better so much faster than when I was fighting all that other stuff as well. Does that make sense? So what I do with retreats is I make sure the director understands that I love the schedule. I want to know what you want to work on, and I'll do my best to do that. But the team building things that we do need to have time to actually be team building and not just be a game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the nuts and bolts then. You're a director, you're planning your year. How do you decide who to bring in, and how do you figure out the schedule? I mean, everyone learns their show differently, but like when is it most advantageous to have somebody in?
For me, I was much like your high school experience, Garrett. I didn't even start my shows until December. We finished our Christmas concert, and then the next 2 weeks before break, I would bring Jared in, the choreographer. He would spend 4 days with the girls group. They would learn their whole show. The next week, he'd spend 4 days with the mixed group. They would learn their whole show. And then we go on Christmas break. I never had any mandatory rehearsals over Christmas break. I went and unlocked the doors for the kids that were really gung-ho and wanted to run the choreography or whatever, or sing something. And I would go in and sit with them for a couple of hours and let them do that. But I never had any mandatory rehearsals. And so we would start basically putting it all together after Christmas break. And then I would bring Paul in at the end of January before our big reveal show. I would bring him in, and I had 4 different choirs that he would work with. So he would spend X amount of hours with one choir, and then X amount of hours with another choir. And then on the last day, and honestly, Paul, I don't remember whose idea it was. It was probably yours. We decided that they would perform for each other. We didn't allow parents or anything like that to come in. They would perform for each other and exhibit what they worked on and because the other, they're in another choir. They haven't seen what these kids are doing yet. And then so they get to see it for the first time. And something that was always hard for me was letting them actually do a run through without stopping them. So it would be a run through that they wouldn't stop, and they would get applause and all the appropriate places and stuff like that. And then we had a big party, and we'd maybe do a theme party where they superheroes or whatever, and they would all bring food in. They call it a pitch in Indiana. I never heard of that until I moved to Indiana. I always thought it was a potluck, but they do a pitch in, and people would bring food, and they would just have a big party. They'd play Just Dance and sing karaoke and hang out, and that was huge. So that was before we competed. And then once we started competing, based on the feedback I was getting from the judges, if I wasn't able to achieve what they were looking for, then I would look to bring someone in, and if it was choreography, I would bring in someone that could work with choreography, usually not Jared, someone else, because even though, I know Jared, he doesn't remember what he did anyway, but it's still his stuff, you know what I mean? And so I'd bring someone else in to do that, or if it was vocal stuff, I would bring in other people. And I'm very fortunate. I live in Indianapolis, so I could bring in someone local that could work with the kids, and I wouldn't have to pay a whole lot to bring someone in. And I did that throughout the season. I work with a group that literally brings in 2 clinicians a week. He'll bring in 2 different clinicians every single week to work with his choirs, so that they're constantly getting feedback from someone else. And I know some people that bring in maybe 1 person for the whole year. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. What do you think, Paul?
Okay.
Well, when I was a young music educator, I every year I would connect with Ron Helms, who was the god of show choir for many, many years at Carmel. And I would sit down and bring my list of inquiries that I would have. And I remember him telling me that, it really doesn't matter when you rehearse, or it has to work for you. And you have to go with your gut instinct. What do you think the schedule will look like for your kids? and can they handle it? And you put it together, and then you do it by trial or error. That had such an impressive impact on how I developed the program that I had on Alaska, where I taught. But I think that Hersel's exactly right. You take them as far as you possibly can, and then that's when you have to just step back and say, okay, I can't dance at all, so I'm going to bring somebody in that really has a feel for the movement, and that just worked for me. I could usually do what I needed to do vocally, and there are a lot of arrangers that are upset with me because I take things up a little bit too high for and then they see that as a challenge, and then the next year they write things up higher, and I'll take them even higher.
Brad Gardner and I have a running bet on whether or not Paul will invert things up when I write them. Usually he does. Usually he does.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good point, because I do think it's important for schools to bring in their staff, like the people that are creating the show. But I think it's also important to bring in people who have no idea what you're doing.
Just because I don't want to be the one saying it.
Well, I just think.
I mean, I'll say it, but I want. Why do you think that's important? I just lagged out, so I missed what you said.
Well, so the way I look at it is, if I write a show for somebody, you spend a couple of weeks working on it, or if you're choreographing a show, you spend a couple of weeks with them, and then you move on to other things. And if you get the chance to come back and take another look at it, you can see kind of how it fits the kids. I mean, because that's really the point of getting custom choreography and custom music. It's getting stuff that fits the choir. And just because something worked one year doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work another year, And so for me as an arranger, it's really helpful to go in and say, oh, that didn't sound like the way I thought it would sound, or whatever. So I think that's important, but I also think it's good to bring in people who have never seen the show, have no idea what the song, because you can get a true first impression. And in many ways, it's kind of a preview of what judges are going to think at competitions. Because an outside clinician, somebody who's not familiar with the content, they're going to come in and they're just going to be looking at the big picture stuff, and they're going to see things that pop out to them that wouldn't necessarily pop out to you because you've gotten used to it, basically. What do you think is a reasonable expectation for directors of what clinicians can and can't fix? If I've got Paul Gulsvig for 6 hours, like what can I reasonably expect him to accomplish, and what's, what, I guess another way of putting that would be like, what, if you're bringing somebody in, like, what are the best kinds of things for them to focus on?
Well, for me, I'm always looking for that one spot in the number where it's an aha moment, so something has to build into that aha moment, and something has to pull away. Whenever I see or hear repetition in an arrangement, there has to be some type of artistic direction for that repetition. If they do it 3 times, it either has to grow good, better, best, or it has to start loud and decrescendo, or go soft, loud, soft. But something that's going to be appropriate for how the choreography is laid on them, and it is accentuating the choreography, but it also has to have some type of artistic direction in and of itself. For me, I like to have clean endings where that if it's a dance break, and the combo is done with the dance break, they're not playing on at the same dynamic level when the vocalists restart. And so those are things that I focus on. I think that there always have to be special moments. So I'm constantly on the lookout for an a cappella moment, for at a cadence, or a particularly soft section that I know they can handle a cappella. So those are things that I would look for in an arrangement.
Something while you were talking, something that stuck out to me is, what you're describing is basically coming in and sort of tinkering with stuff and trying different things and adding stuff and experimenting. But I also think you're going to have some clinicians who are just going to come in, look at the score, and focus on just the execution. So I think maybe knowing what the person you bring in is likely to do, I think, is an important part of it too, because I think you need that. You need the tinkerers, and then sometimes you just need people for broader sort of principles. If your kid's vocal placement isn't quite working, that's a totally different issue than, oh, our show needs some more aha moments, right? And that maybe has to do with the part of the year too, when you bring somebody in.
Well, I think that the first step is, what does the director want? I mean, what are they looking for? And I would say that probably 80% of the clinics I do, they don't know. They just want someone to come in and they want someone to run the rehearsal. And I'm not implying that's because they're lazy. They're just stuck. And so, or they want new ideas. Part of your question was, what can they expect? And like the things that we can't fix, we can always teach better ways to breathe or to sing with more resonance, what you're just describing a second ago. Demonstrate how to create a resonant sound and not oversung, because show choir is almost, I joked last time I judged, they joked that I'm going to have a tick sheet and write how many times I say don't oversing, don't push, because they tend to, they want to be heard, so they just start yelling at us. And teach them how to have a nice resonant sound that will carry rather than being forced out. But you're not going to get that for their whole show in 1, 3, or 6 or 8 hour. You're just not. That takes time to build up those muscles and that muscle memory, and to figure out how to do that. And that has to happen when we leave. It's not going to, I'm not going to reteach them how to breathe in one rehearsal. Or if they're all, we can talk all we want about, you're not matching this vowel here for whatever style it is, whatever it is that you want to do. You still have to agree that you're going to sing the same vowel. It's going to be placed the same way. And that's not something that we can fix moments and show them how to do that, but it's not going to happen for the whole show in one rehearsal. Even the most amazing choirs in the country don't do that. The things that they're struggling with, they're not going to fix in one time. So we come in and introduce ways to address that and ways to fix that. My wife is a marriage and family therapist, and she describes when I do this, it's like when she's working with a couple and she gives them the tools for how to rectify an issue that they have. That's what we're doing. We're giving them the tools for ways to rectify what they're doing, but that has to continue after we leave. When you're talking about the technical aspects and the other side of that, the tinkering is what I call the fun part. I used to love when Paul or Eric or Eric Van Cleve or Aaron Coates or whoever I'd bring in, when I would bring them in, I would love when they would tinker with things and do different things, because that would spark my creativity. And then I would start tinkering with other things in the show, because the more changes I made to my show, the more it made my kids think, and the better that they were at adapting to those things as they came along. And then, so if we were going to make a major change in the warm-up room from the daytimes to finals, they could do it, they could handle it. and everyone would be on the edge of their seats going, where did this come from? Rather than just sitting back and used to what's happening. And so the kids would come alive, I would come alive, and it often takes that thing that as directors becomes so mundane. The repetition can become mundane, it can be very monotonous, but when we start allowing ourselves to be creative in that, then it's fun again. And we, the directors, the teachers, will start having fun again, and the kids will respond to that like you wouldn't believe. And so often it's the clinician that is the catalyst for that. And that's another reason why it's so great to have someone else come in, because it'll rejuvenate the director as well.
So what are things directors can do beforehand to get the most out of a clinic? I mean, what are things that you've seen that have really helped, you know, whether it's communicating beforehand, or, I mean, what are sort of the best practices?
So again, I got this from Paul, and so I'll let him talk mainly about it. But what I do now, and I would say that maybe 50% of the people I go work with, they actually do this. I have them send me a video of a rehearsal class. I don't care. I just want a video of them singing and dancing, or even just singing, but singing and dancing, running their show. Like, it can be song by song, stop, whatever. I don't care about costuming. I mean, you know, if I could see it all together at some point, that'd be great, but I really don't care about the costumes. So if I can see it before and they send me their music, I literally will pour over their show. I'll spend hours, and I have a pause button, so I can pause and I can write, and I take my iPad and I write right in their music, right where it is in their music, what's going on. And I developed if I write in blue, it's for the band. If I write in red, it's for the choreography. And if I write in black, it's for the singers. And so I have this sheet music that's just littered with color. And then I have yet to go to a clinic where I have been able to work on every single song in their show as much as we could, right? Because I'm there for a limited time. If you bring me in for 3 hours, there is zero chance we're gonna work your whole show, zero. Because it's just not reasonable to think that. And so when I leave, I can then airdrop these files to them, and they have everything that I spent hours and hours working on for them, and that gives them something great to do. But I think a huge step that is often missed is the director needs to make a big deal about, we're bringing in so-and-so, here's why we're bringing them in, and make a production of that, so that when the clinician comes in, the kids are ready to buy in and they're ready to go for it and try, rather than having the clinician beg for that stuff for an hour before they start actually doing it. But I don't know, talk more, Paul.
Well, first of all, I really demand to get the music ahead of time, and then a videotape or some reproduction of it. And I can't tell you how many times that I've watched Franklin Central's competition show, and I'll watch it and I'll watch the opener 7 or 8 times and won't see a thing that I can make better. Stupid Garrett Breeze. It's so well written, and there's nothing that I can. And then I'll hear one spot that, I bet if they, and I change that, and then I play it on my keyboard. Yeah, okay, that works. And then I'll find another, and so I also go in very, very well prepared with things that I feel are going to make the show better, and I run through those with the director before I present it to the kids, because I want them to buy into the changes as well. And then they're going to help me with those as we approach the rehearsal, and I think that has a real positive effect on the changes, so the kids understand, and when the kids are ready for that, they appreciate the changes too. It's really a fun project to go in and share what you think could be a better approach to that little section that they've been struggling with. But I can't believe how much fun it is to listen and then talk on this podcast. My brain is going 1,000 miles an hour as I'm listening to you and reacting to it. Often what comes out of my mouth doesn't make a lot of sense, but the one thing I had Daniel Gothrop write a song for my concert choir, and he said as an arranger or composer, he felt restricted by the publishing company how much he was allowed to put on the paper as far as dynamics or artistic changes. And he said he felt that there was only 10% of all the artistic changes for that piece of music are on the score. The other 90% is up to the director. And that's what I feel are my challenges as I go into a piece of music. The arranger or the composer is restricted. And they have to do all of the notes. They have to do with that. And they have just a small portion of their time is spent on dynamics and, rallentando here, or it's my responsibility to find the 90% of the other artistic changes. So.
Well, and now that you say that, a lot of it too, I think, is merging it with the choreo. I mean,
yes,
I arrange something and I don't know what the visuals are going to be when I write it. So it's
Right.
not a question of like right or wrong. I mean, a lot of times I will get choreo videos afterwards, and sometimes I'll change things, but there's every time you add a layer, it changes how everything else, fits together. You add costumes, you add choreography, you add the band, you add lights, you add whatever you're doing, so there's always this kind of need to kind of step back and reevaluate, I think.
And I think good.
No.
I was just going to say, one of the things I think that directors can do before bringing someone in is remembering that maybe the choreographer didn't really even look at the score, right? And so they didn't look where it's intended to get really soft and intimate or whatever. And so they're just dancing, they're doing the aerobics. And so as the director, you can look at that and go, okay, it's okay to sing louder here because you're dancing, and then find another place. And sometimes I feel like it's so precise, like they want to be so precise, which obviously there is a part of music that needs to be, you need to sing the right rhythms, you need to, it needs to be precise. But like Paul just said, there are so many artistic choices that you can make, and it's fun to try different things. It really truly is. It takes something that might be getting monotonous and giving it new life. And I encourage you just to try something new, even if you're not going to keep it, but it's fun to try different things. Paul was talking about a minute ago, before we move on, about how he would go in with the music ahead of time. And it's so nice now. And this is one of the things I miss a lot of things about teaching, but I used to have to mail him a folder with the actual printed music, so I would go and print the music and I would send him a folder, and then inevitably he would take everything out of the folder and go to Kinko's and staple it a special way and all this stuff. But his OCD is his own thing. But now it's an email, right? It's a simple email with a PDF, and it can happen in seconds rather than, so that's really, really nice. But one of the things I loved was that when he would pull my kids aside, he would find the dance captains and he would pull the kids aside and say, we're going to try this new thing in this song. And he would describe it. And then they would have to figure it out before we actually introduced it to the choir. And that was such an awesome thing to witness, not being a dancer or not, but to watch someone else who's like me, who's not a dancer, have an idea about how things could go together differently, and then take two teenagers and say, do this. What do you think of this? Let's try this, and watch their eyes go, that's awesome. And then do it. That's a lot of fun. And again, isn't that what this is? It's all about is having fun with kids doing what they love to do. And so finding ways to remind ourselves of that, the kids of that, I think is a huge part of what we do.
So let's shift gears a little bit and kind of get into the nitty gritty. What should people expect in terms of cost and logistics and all of that kind of stuff? If you're a new director fresh out of school and you never hired a clinician, you both have hired multiple people, so you kind of know the range of, some people I assume charge more, some people charge less and want different things in terms of scheduling and travel arrangements or whatever. But kind of give us an overview of how does the part nobody talks about work?
So for me, I try to be as upfront as I can about what the cost is and all that. Now that this is my full-time job, sometimes I get in my own head and I worry about, if I ask them to pay for another night at the hotel, am I gonna lose the work? Am I, that kind of stuff. But then I think to myself, it's better to be upfront and be like, this is what's gonna cost. And here's why it's going to cost that. If I'm traveling 10 hours away from home, I can't be expected to travel the 10 hours in one day, right, and get there and then run a rehearsal, right, and be fresh for that. So they need to be prepared for realistically thinking, what's going to be the most advantageous for my program. And so, when I was teaching, I would expect to cover the cost of any travel expense that's involved, whether that's, renting a car or mileage or whatever. And then a hotel stay, and then an hourly rate or a daily rate, depending on, and I know some people, they just charge a daily rate where, it's $800 and you can have me for the entire day. Whatever you want to do for the day is for the day. And I know some people just strictly charge by the hour and they don't have a cap. It's just an hourly rate that they charge. But I think that it's just important to look at, when you're doing this, it's important to look at the big picture and say, okay, it's going to cost me around this much to bring someone in locally or from far away or whatever, and take all that into consideration with your budget. And you have to pay someone what they're worth, and that sometimes is a thing that people tend to be like, oh, it's expensive. We'll just say $100 an hour is pretty much a standard. Some people charge more, some people charge less. I don't know anybody that charges less than, I don't know if you do, Paul, but I don't know anybody that charges less than 100 an hour. But they charge 100 an hour. And what I try to, again, it's my job now. And so I have to do a little bit of soliciting, which I hate. I absolutely hate trying to sell myself. I hate even my friends. I hate reaching out to them saying, I'm going to be in your area. Do you want me to come in? I don't like that at all. And it's not because my ego says they should want me to come in. It's not like that at all. I don't want to put anybody out. And, but it's part of my job now. And so part of my soliciting, if you will, is I advertise greatly what I do before I come in. Like that I'm going to be very prepared. I'm going to, if there's two things I can guarantee anybody that I go work with. It's that, number one, the majority of your kids will have a good time because I'm a cut up, I'm a spaz, I'm all over the place. And when I leave, your show will be better than when I came in. And it doesn't matter where I go or who I'm working with, I can guarantee you that. If for no other reason, then I'm just reinforcing the stuff the director said. And the kids are going, oh yeah, we should do that, like we said earlier. So to answer your question, I would say you can expect it to be $100 an hour for the person to come in, and then you should cover their expenses, whatever that flights, that I don't turn in meal receipts. I don't do that, only because this sounds weird. I don't eat that much. Like I don't like, I eat all the time, but it's snacks. I eat junk food. So I don't stop on my way there and get lunch and then dinner. And then, I usually go all day and maybe have like half a meal, and then I eat at night and so I'm not going to charge them for that. And I just don't want to keep track of all that. So I only charge for my hourly rate and then all the travel that's involved with it.
I have no idea what to charge. I don't know what other people charge. I had no idea that I was going to do this when I finished teaching. I don't know how this happened. So now I've just bumped up to $150 an hour. Am I worth $150 an hour? No.
Yes, you are.
There's no way I am.
Yes, you are.
But within that hour, I probably spent 12 hours preparing for their show, and I don't charge them for that.
Right.
I've had 47 years of teaching experience, and that goes into that $150. Now I also have Alzheimer's, so now I can't. I have to. That was a joke, and I'm going to be putting in. I'm going to have to take some out. I can't. I can't have it be 150 because now I'm not as well as I used to be. But yes, I charge 150, but I also do $650 a day, regardless of how many hours. Am I worth $650 a day? No, not at all. But I am worth it because I spend a large amount of time preparing.
Right, but so that makes you worth it. Just to be clear.
Well, you're not just showing up and shooting from the hip and deciding on the spot. I mean, you're
right.
You're putting in the work beforehand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to earlier we were talking about the arranging, and why I said that I wanted you to say it first. That's why it is important to bring your arranger in, and that's why, because not only your arranger is going to get to look at what they did. Jennifer Gulsvig.
Hey.
The arranger's not going to only see what you did, but it helps them in the future do better from the jump rather than so. Hi, Jennifer.
Jennifer drove all the way to St. Paul just to see Garrett and Herschel on this podcast.
Well, let's get her a screen. Come on, sit down.
Hi.
You clinic a lot too. So what would your advice be to people that are getting started and wanting to do this sort of thing and wanting to be a clinician and wanting to go and work with different groups? What would you tell them?
To do it. I don't know. I love it. It's my favorite thing about show choirs, that like clinic experience, that you working with different groups and just getting to see the growth and to like play around and make those changes in their shows and help them get to that next level. It's my favorite thing about show choir is the changes and the getting better throughout the season.
Do you have a favorite clinic story?
Oh. No.
Well, and her, you guys.
One of my favorite clinics was when Paul and Jennifer came together.
Oh.
2010. They came together. I think it was the weekend of my contest. Probably, it makes the most sense.
Yes.
And so they were both judging, and so they came together, and it's not dissimilar to when you and I do Loveland together, Garrett. The back and forth, it was awesome. I mean, that's probably one of my favorite clinics that I ever did, was having them together, because it was just so many different ideas swirling around, and of course, like, you know, my kids knew it was coming, and they were ready, knowing that they were going to have to be quick on their feet and quick thinkers, and so that's what made it so. But it was awesome. I loved it. That's probably my favorite one ever. And most people know me well enough to know I'm not just saying that because they're sitting there.
That's true. Very true. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say hi. It's good to see your faces.
And you said that we can cut out things that we're not happy with, right, Garrett?
Of course.
So.
Rude.
Bye, Jen.
Bye.
I'll tell you my favorite clinician story was last weekend with Lafayette Jefferson. Number one, it was phenomenal seeing one of Herschel's kids who, you know, got incredible training and has taken all of that training and funneled it into a really good program, and has taken the program from it was struggling for a while, and now he is bringing it back, and they were having troubles. They were having some real struggles at their retreat, and there were some power struggles, and the economic diversity is so huge with the kids, and there's some elitist and some have-nots, and we did a closing activity on the second night of the retreat, and they completely fell apart, and they talked for at least an hour, and they connected with people that they hadn't connected with for quite a while. There were apologies, and we wrapped it up, and we said, okay, it's it's time for the night snack, and one of the little kids raised their hand. She said, could we keep going for another hour? And every kid said yes. And Jashawn and I sat back, and they just talked for an entire hour about how they can make the group better. And there were friendships that had ended and now were reunited because of what Jashawn and Herschel had done. And those things are once in a million. That's all I got.
So since you kind of broached the subject, what are your thoughts on working with groups that are struggling, or working with students that are not really grasping what you're trying to do? When it's one thing to plan ahead and, oh, you can change this, but what are some ideas of what to do when you're getting pushback? I mean, obviously you can't force people to do it if they don't want to, but is there a way to kind of show them in a different method to get them to engage?
Yeah, I think we've all experienced, when you go, anybody that's been in front of a group of people, occasionally you run into a group of people, and there'll be one or two or three or four that just could care less what you're talking about, or just glare at you the whole time, because they're not in at all. So I started, just the silly thing that I do is, and I mentioned this before we started, so I'll make it shorter, that, I wear a shirt much like I'm wearing now with some kind of weird logo on it. And it's usually something I actually enjoy. I like the PlayStation, I like Marvel, so I'll wear a Marvel shirt, or I'll wear a Star Wars shirt, or whatever, Harry Potter. And, I go in, and almost immediately I connect with someone. There's some kid that's like, oh, I like that too. He must not be that bad. you know, or whatever. So that's just something like real tiny that I do that's psychological. You know, when I was teaching, I would very intentionally change out of my work clothes into something more comfortable. Number one, because I wanted to be comfortable, but number two, I wanted them to see that I'm not always the guy with the tie, you know, that kind of thing. So I think that helps. But almost always, what I've witnessed worked are compliments, you know, and that sounds so whatever. But if I have a kid that is just completely not into it, not whatever, I try to be as honest as I can. I find the tiniest thing that they're doing well, and I make a big production of it. What they're doing well, and that I appreciate what they did, or something like that. When I go work with, when I do clinics, it's not my choir, so it's very rare that I'm calling individuals out for doing the wrong thing. Most of the time when someone hires me to come in, the comment I get most is, "We bring you in because you're brutally honest." I get that a lot, you know, and I am. I'm going to tell you like it is, but I don't have to say it to Johnny. You know, Johnny, you look like it's not working. You're terrible. I'm not going to say that. I wouldn't say that anyway. But you know, I'm going to find creative ways to say what we need to work on. If it were my choir, I wouldn't do that. I would just say, "Johnny, fix it." But finding a way to show that kid that they're important, to connect with them, it'll flip it. I mean, it really will, because that's probably what they need to hear. That's probably why they look the way they look. And this sounds, if I'm going to do an activity or I'm going to do something, give them a job. Pick that kid out and give them a job. "Hey, can you help me pass these things out? I need to make sure every kid." Or, "Hey, can you go around every kid? We need to number them off 1 through 5. Can you go around and number them off 1 through 5? All of a sudden, that one kid who maybe, you know, just being a jerk for whatever reason, now they have a purpose that is just theirs. And oftentimes that will help to solve that problem. And then it's not me then begging a kid to do what we're asking them to do. It's getting them on my side and getting them to come over. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll let Paul talk, is often same kid, I'll ask a question. You know, what's up specifically to that kid? "Susie, what do we do to make this song better?" And that's how I make them answer the question, make them participate by saying, remembering something we did. And then if nothing else, they think, "Oh no, he's going to ask me another question. I have to pay attention." So.
I believe that of all the clinicians working in the show choir world, I would come in dead last for being able to work with groups that are not responding to me. I go to pieces. I just am not good at that. People have said, you know, they're just throwing tennis balls at you, and you're trying to catch all of the tennis balls. And yeah, that's what I do. Because I want to change the world. I want to make everybody better. And I don't understand why you don't want to be better. And I take it personally. Now with COVID, and all you see are the test pattern eyes, no wonder teachers are struggling, because they have no idea what's happening between here and here. They can't read that. So every teacher is struggling. This is the most difficult time to teach I've ever experienced in my 49 years of teaching. It's a struggle, but I grew up with a college professor who would ask a question, and no matter what they said as an answer, he made it the right answer, and he would praise them for that right answer. And I'm kind of that person. I'm a big cheerleader, but boy, do I take it personally when kids are not reacting positively to me. And if it continues, then I just will not return to a group like that, because it beats me up too bad.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, I mean, I've noticed, I don't have nearly as much experience as the two of you, but you know, every group is totally different. I'll never forget the first group I ever clinic judged. It was at a competition, and it was my first time ever doing it, and the group was just terrible. I mean, they were just the worst. And I you know, I kind of had my list of stuff, and I went in there kind of like, okay, you know, here we go. And then I walked in the room, and the kids were just bouncing off the walls. I mean, they were I mean, they were just thrilled. And I find out, you know, that it's the first time they've ever performed ever. It's the first time they've ever set foot on risers, you know, and in their whole life. And it just kind of clicked like, okay, we're having a different conversation than I thought we were going to have, because those kids were in a different place, you know. They've never seen a riser before, you know, and so you're not going to go in there and rip them to shreds on their blocking, you know, because it's just not where they're at. And so I think part of the preparation that goes into clinicking is figuring out like, where are they, you know, and like that's, I think, a lot of what you get from the director beforehand, you know, is just kind of, I always ask sort of where the emotional state of the group is, you know, do they need good cop or bad cop, you know, do they need someone to make them feel good, or do they need someone to, you know, run them through the ringer and kick their butts a little bit, you know. But a lot of that is just, I mean, that's what teaching is, right? So it's figuring out where they are and then figuring out how to make them better.
Yep.
I wanted to thank both of you. This has been really awesome. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up? Any parting words of wisdom?
You know, like I said, find ways to connect with every kid, make them understand why they're important, and understand that no matter how good you are, no matter what is, don't be threatened by bringing a clinician is no means a place of surrender, or you're not good enough, so you have to bring someone else to do that. That's not it at all. A great time to bring a clinician is when it's not quite all together, because then they can make changes that are not set in stone, and it's easier to make those changes, right? If we all said, hey, let's learn Jingle Bells in a completely different way, it's harder to do that than it is to just learn a brand new song, because you've known Jingle Bells your whole life. And so someone that's, you know, that doesn't read music all that well or whatever, they're going to struggle more with that than in just teaching them a whole brand new song. So if you bring a clinician in, it's not, oftentimes I find that people are reluctant to do it because it's not, their show's not ready. You hear that a lot. No, my show's not ready yet for anyone else to see it, or I'm not ready for you to see it, or whatever. And that's what I encourage. If you feel that way, you might consider bringing someone else in to look at it, even if it's your principal or the band director or just someone else, because there's probably, that's not the case. That's the time you want to bring someone else in. And then there are different stages where it's great. Like right now is a great time to bring in someone to tinker with your show and to do all kind of fun little things and try all these different things. And in a couple of weeks, when it's like the middle, that's when you want to find to like really figure it out. Like, oh, we missed finals by 2 points again. Like, and you know, that's where I feel like I have a real strength. I can help you come in and I can show you where you can find an extra 10, 15 points. Those kind of things. And then towards the end of the season, it's like these things have not been working. What do? We have 2 contests left, you know, and there's different stages. But it's, I promise you, it's never a situation of someone's going to come in and judge you for what you're doing. Our only goal is to help you take what you're doing and find ways to do it better for your kids. And often it has nothing to do with what the director's doing. It's just what the kids are doing, how they're responding to the director. So a new way to say what they're already saying will just go a long, long way. That's all.
Particularly now in this current time that we're facing, you know, way back, they said, everyone has the right to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of
Pursuit of
happiness. Pursuit did not mean to chase after. The definition of pursuit at that time was not to chase after, it was to practice. And what we have to do is we have to instill in our kids the practice of happiness. And what a better vehicle to do it with than music. That's an opportunity for us to practice music. And through that practice of music, they essentially find out that they are a better person because of what they've learned through music. Being the best you can be is achieved by practicing happiness. And during this struggling time, that's the one thing that I want everybody to understand. Practice happiness. Be the best you can be.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Thanks, guys.